Coromandel Scott Simpson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And as Chairman of the Local Government and Environment Select Committee, it gives me no pleasure at all this evening to be standing in the Parliament of New Zealand supporting, reluctantly, validating retrospective legislation for an albeit sincere and non-malicious mistake, but a mistake nonetheless, made some 10 years ago by professional, highly paid, highly skilled, competent on the surface face of it, people employed by the Christchurch City Council. Sir, this is a bill that is sponsored by my colleague, Christchurch Central MP, the Honourable Nikki Wagner, and she's set out very clearly in her introductory comments to this second reading the reasons why we are debating in the Parliament tonight this piece of retrospective validation legislation. The bill itself is promoted by the Christchurch City Council, who were, of course, the authors of the error. The bill validates specified rates set between 2004 and 5 and the 2012-2013 financial year. And because of the rates irregularities that came to light in Council's review, the legislation is frankly the only method for putting right an error that occurred more than 10 years ago and well before the Christchurch or the Canterbury earthquakes. So, Christchurch City Council failed to state in their rates resolution over those years that the rates were themselves payable by instalment. Now, the excuse, if you like, or the rationale for the error was simply that it was to be a simple piece of internal local legislation within the City Council, something that councils do every year in terms of providing for their fiscal responsibilities and their rating responsibilities under the Local Government Rating Act of 2002. But what happened in this case, sir, was that no resolution was moved and passed through Council, through the elected officials, that ensured that rates were to be payable by instalment. And furthermore, sir, there was no date set, or no date set by which those instalments would be paid. And further, there were no penalties set and no penalty dates set for those instalments. The Minister in her comments made the point, and she's right, that actually no ratepayer has been negatively impacted as a result of this error. But the simple matter is that had an alert ratepayer decided to challenge City Council over any one of those 10 years on these matters, then court action would have ensued, and almost certainly Council would have come out the loser from that litigation. And so that's a completely unsatisfactory situation for the ratepayers of Christchurch. It's a completely unsatisfactory situation for the elected councillors of Christchurch, and it's a completely unsatisfactory situation for the highly paid and professionally skilled employees who are supposed to oversee these relatively simple matters. Now, sir, the failures actually put the Christchurch City Council in breach of the Local Government Rating Act of 2002. And then, as a result of the investigations in 2013, when the irregularities were actually discovered, further irregularities were uncovered, and they were in respect of the Council's uniform annual general charge and some of the targeted rates for the same period of time. Information, sir, about how the liability for targeted rates and the uniform annual general charge were to be calculated was simply not included in the rates resolutions that were put to Council for their attention in Council chambers. Sir, my colleague, the Honourable Nikki Wagner, I think correctly says that bad things sometimes happen when you're trying to do good. But I'd counter that by saying that the road to hell is often paved with good intention. And just because something is meant to be simple doesn't mean that it needs to be incomplete, doesn't mean that it needs to be inaccurate, and doesn't mean that it needs to be incompetent. Council officers at the time, and I hasten to point out that we're going back 10 years. I doubt that many, if any, of the officers responsible at the time may still be in the employ of the council. I'm not 100% sure about that. Certainly it's several CEOs ago. So I'm not going to necessarily pour scorn and derision upon existing or current officers, but they failed council, they failed their ratepayers, and they failed themselves in terms of their professional ability and capability. Rates were calculated correctly, rates were collected correctly, but rates motion, the actual legal bit, the piece that is important, was missed out. And that's a fundamental flaw for council officers who actually are employed to ensure that I's are dotted and T's are crossed. Sir, we had only one submission, and that was indeed from the council itself. We travelled to Christchurch. We were able to, as a select committee, to link our visit with some rather better legislative work, and that was to do with the Christchurch Arts Centre and a bill that was discussed earlier this evening in Parliament, sir. And so when we came to consider the Christchurch City Council Rates Validation Bill, we received only one submission from the council, and this is it. It's a mere 2 pages. It's a relatively perfunctory submission. It contains a clinical analysis of what happened, how it happened, and what needs to be done to correct it. And the simple matter is what needs to be corrected is that this Parliament is required to pass retrospective validating legislation to dig Christchurch City Council out of a hole. That's not a process that this Parliament likes doing, and it's not a process that I think any member of the House thinks that we should be spending too much time on, and something that we certainly don't expect from a council as large and as well-resourced and as significant as the Christchurch City Council. What was immediately apparent to members of the Select Committee, and I think I speak on behalf of most of the committee members, was that the submitters on behalf of council were relaxed almost to the point of being comatose in terms of their submission. They seem to be really just appearing before us in a perfunctory manner, saying, oh well, we made a mistake, all too bad, best endeavours, Parliament will put it right. Well, I'm not sure that that's necessarily very good. In the 2-page submission from council, there was no comment about contrition. There was no concession as to liability. There was no attempt to identify those people who were responsible. There was no indication that any kind of employment disciplinary action had been taken. In fact, there was no sense at all of any sense of personal responsibility for the situation that council and now Parliament finds itself having to remedy. And so it's fair to say, sir, that I thought as chair our committee was singularly underwhelmed by the submission of the Christchurch City Council, and that I, for one, didn't come away from hearing their oral submission or indeed reading their written submission with any sense of renewed confidence in the future prospects for getting things right. Now, that may be a little bit harsh, but I think that as a Parliament we could reasonably and sensibly expect a higher level of professionalism from one of the country's largest councils. And to expect anything less is an abrogation of their role and responsibility as a significant and large council, but also in terms of their role as professionals and employees of council. Sir, we all live and work in an environment of constant change. We all live and work in an area where we're only human and we all make mistakes. But, sir, this was a mistake of quite significant proportion. The fact that it didn't negatively impact on ratepayers is, sir, a matter more of good luck than good management. I very reluctantly commend this bill to the House.
Member for Christchurch East, Portal Williams.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Firstly, sir, I just want to make some general comments about the Rates Validation Bill and look to some of the substance of it. And then finally, I want to make some comments with regards to what the member across the other side of the House has just said. I think by the end of this particular session, we will be intimately aware of each individual part of this this bill. It is a small bill, it's a fix-up bill.